All right, guys, hopefully you have been practicing your basic cylinders. I'm a huge fan of choosing one thing and sticking with it continuously, and I'm hoping that my other videos, throwing a basic cylinder, has encouraged you to just kind of stick with that. So now I'm going to talk about how to modify the skills you learned from throwing a 1 pound cylinder into a 7 pound cylinder. So there are a few things that we need to remember. This is a 7 pound ball. It's actually standard 563. It's got a little bit of grog to it, but has a little bit more elasticity to allow me to really pull the walls. And the first thing I want to do, because I am going to cone this clay, is I wanted to start in sort of this cone-shaped, grimace-shaped gumdrop. It's going to help me really get that clay to go straight up without creating that volcano. Very often with larger pieces of clay, when we start to cone, the sides of it are going to come up and the center is going to stay down in the middle, and we get that volcano. A volcano is not the end of the world as long as you don't close it up to trap some air in the center. So I'm not going to start my wheels super fast. First, we're going to do a little modification. So masonite bats tend to warp. If your bat is warped this way, you want to flip it this way. So when someone says your bat's upside down, that's usually what it means. We're going to get it as close to the center as we can. Okay. So again, I'm not going to start with my wheel going super fast. What I want to do is I want to take all these little bumpy parts and sort of compress them into the clay. I'm using an aura ring, and I've gotten really good at throwing with it, except larger clay is not going to be conducive. All right, so what I've done is I've just pushed towards the center, and I'm just sort of smoothing out my edges. My wheel's not going super fast, but what I've done is I've sort of fixed all those little lumpy, bumpy parts. So now I'm just going to do a quick cone down. Again, when we're coning down, I'm going to review the cone up in a second. We're working on sections. So if you can cone 2 pounds of clay, that allows you to break those sections into smaller pieces. So when you cone up, you'll center a 1/4 pound, a 1/2 pound, 3/4 of a pound, a pound, until you get down to the bottom. So what we're doing with the 7 pounds is we're just sort of first wanted to smooth out those edges on the side, get them sort of out of the way. For those of you who haven't watched my previous videos, the way that I use my body as extra strength, I lock my left elbow into my pelvis bone, I close my leg, and I push in at around between 6 and 7 o'clock. That's going to push the clay in the center. A tension rod has been created between my wrist, my elbow, so that my upper body is not moving with the clay. So I'm going to get it straight back into sort of that gumdrop position by dropping my right wrist, and now I'm going to cone up. So when I start to cone up, this is the only time my pinkies are really invited to the party. My pinky and my ring finger are going to become this very hard sort of tool on both sides. I put them down on the bats and I scoop. What I'm doing now is I'm getting rid of that sort of skirt or slope of clay that often gives us a hard time. I'm putting that in the clay, and now I'm pushing my left palm towards my entire right hand, and I'm squeezing towards the middle. Notice where the clay goes. The clay now goes up, and now I'm going to follow it up. And when I follow it up, I'm going to start to close my hands up. Now, because I'm going a little slower, I did create sort of that volcano, but my sides have allowed me to be able to work on concentrate just on the top. So in order to stop this volcano from happening, or from letting it close up, I take my pinky, I put it in the hole. I'm going to peel back this clay, thus exposing the dry clay in the center. My wheel's going fast. Push down, drop my right wrist, wrap that clay around, and now that clay that was dry and stuck at the bottom of the volcano is up on the top. I'm going to add some water to it, and I'm going to start to push down. Now, with your clay getting bigger, we're going to increase the size of our tools. So when we first centered 2 pounds of clay, we used only this part and this part to squeeze towards the center. Then as we increase the size of our clay, we'll use a little bit more of our hand, And now with 7 pounds, we're using almost our entire hand, but we're still bringing the strength from our bodies. Same thing when we go to cone down. When we're doing 1 pound, 2 pounds, we may just use sort of the side of our hand and the side here. But what I'm actually gonna do is increase the size of my tool, which is my hand, and I'm gonna use this whole part to push down while I'm pushing down on 1/4 of it. One of my tips is we never wanna go across like this. Then we end up with this shaped clay. And if we go to cone up again, that's gonna create more of a volcano. So using my entire hand, this is going across here, this is going here, I'm dropping my wrist. I'm gonna start to pay attention to the top part of this clay. I'm gonna work just on sort of this 3 to 4 pounds on top. This mushroom's out, I'm gonna use these fingers, no pinky, to push that clay in over here to squeeze it into there. See how it sort of just filled that in? And now I'm gonna go down a little bit lower. Push in more with my left palm. Add some water. And now I'm gonna use my whole body to sort of get towards the center. Now, my bat is a little loose, so it's got that sort of ticking. So I'm gonna try not to push down into the clay, but more into the center. Now I'm gonna speed up my wheel. If I just leave my hands here, the clay should listen to me. Now, I'm not gonna take my hands off super fast. That fast motion may throw it off. Once I feel as though it's centered, I'm just gonna slowly release my hands. Now remember, the pinky wasn't invited. Watch what happens when I squeeze this pinky in. You see that shape right there? That right there is reducing the width of my clay. So I always have my fingers at a little bit of an angle over here, but I'm over here, and I'm just sort of pushing in. All right, so now my clay is ready to open up. Now, again, we are increasing the size of our tools as we increase the size of our clay. So you might have, with 1 pound, used your finger to go in there. The problem with using my finger is my finger does not have the girth or the strength to really go straight down in there. And then how am I gonna open up? So with 2 to 3 pounds, I'll go in with 2 thumbs. What I'm actually gonna do is I'm gonna go in with my wheel moving super fast. I'm gonna use 2 thumbs, but I'm also going to integrate this part of my thumb. Elbows down, hands wrapped around, take 2 thumbs. Now, I'm never gonna do this in 1 try, partially because of the nature of my clay, and also because of the nature of my fingers. They dry out. So I'm gonna take my hands off, slowly wet them. Now, if you notice, sometimes when you open up, you'll get this little lip. By integrating this part of your finger, you're compressing that at the same time. Just sort of rotating my wrist towards the center, taking my hands out. By having my hands on the outside, I'm creating a road for this clay to stay in, sort of like, don't go out here, don't go out there, because these fingers are stopping that from happening. So with this cylinder, I'm gonna go ahead and check the bottom. I don't want a foot on this. So although that may look like a lot of clay, I'm gonna use the wire. I want my walls to be about that thick because I'm gonna do some carving into this. So if my clay is this thick, when I use the wire tool, it'll go down a little, and then I'm really good with that foot. The larger your pot, the thicker your walls tend to have to be. All right, so now I'm gonna open up, and again, when I opened up normally a smaller piece, I would use 2 fingers and pull towards me, or some people will pull this way. I don't do that. So now, bigger clay, bigger tool, I'm gonna go from 2 fingers to 4 fingers. I'm gonna go all the way down to that hole, and in one fast swoop, I'm gonna open up the bottom of my pot. This hand did a lot more work than normal. I don't want this clay to come all the way out here, and I'm using so much strength on the inside that I'm afraid if I'm not backing it up with counter pressure here, it may go all the way off. Now, some may say, oh, I threw it off center. If your clay was centered to begin with, it's super easy to make it go back. Have that hand, especially with bigger clay, have your hand sort of on the side and just leave your hand in one spot. Don't let your upper body move. Just right there, just tell the clay where you want it to be. Full hands on the top, full hands on the left and the back, and just kind of wait there. Slowly take my hands off, and most of it is listening to me now. So I'm gonna get on in there, compress my floor. this clay, I have a little bit of an ability to really get in there. Again, I just have to leave my sponge in one spot, but notice I'm always touching with two hands. If I do this, my elbow's flying, then we're going all nutso here. So with the first thing I want to do with a larger piece of clay, as I start to pull, I may have this intention of going out accidentally, not intention, but tendency. So I am going to just sort of scoop in. This hand again is back here. I'm going to use the palm of my hand to push the clay in. Then I'm slowly just going to scoop that top in. It's sort of like a claw collar. Pushing in from the back. And I'm just going to take my upper fingers and squish in just a little. So now my top is narrow, but my bottom is still a little wider. So again, going back to the theme of increasing the size of your tool, this is when I believe a knuckle or more of a hand is necessary. I don't really love using a knuckle with a small piece of clay. I think the tool is way too big to handle that small of clay. But my fingers really aren't big enough to pull this. So what I do is I go back to the sponge, fill it with water. I always start down on the bat, so I start to scoop. I use the side of my finger. I push this clay in. So what I've done is I've stopped that sort of slope or that skirt that usually causes an issue. And my inside hand, again, I'm not just using one finger. I'm going to use a bunch of fingers, but I want them to be in line. So I've increased the size of my tool from this to this, but in one horizontal line. You don't want to be doing this because you're going to give the clay several different directions at the same time. I'm going to start down on the bottom. I'm going to take a really firm grip. And with every revolution, I go up. I'm going to do that corrective pull that I talk about all the time. It was wide here and thin here, so I put a lot of pressure and then less pressure. I'm going to get down on bottom again. Now again, I'm scooping and I'm getting under that clay, and it's called pulling the walls because you're pulling up the clay until you get to the top. Now, again, see I'm using my fingertips, not my fingerprints. When you use your fingerprints, the clay may go up or it may go down. You're not really doing as much. By using your fingertips, you want to get under that clay, get it on top of those fingers, and then systematically pull up. And again, my bottom hand, my outside hand is a little lower than my inside hand. It even starts that way because the floor of the pot is there. I get down here again, scoop up. Notice my hands are not touching, but here is the tip. First, the minute they can touch, I take my thumb out and I touch the other hand. What you want to do when you're throwing something big is you don't want to talk in between pulls. If you stop and you start talking, this arm starts to get relaxed and it doesn't remember the stability that it had when your hands were attached. So you want to pull with your hands attached, pull with your hands attached. Your arm is getting used to this position. Pull with your arms attached. And then when your hands aren't attached, now your arm is sort of remembering how stable it was. When you start to talk, it may be like all wishy-washy and not remember. All right. So now I want to collar this in a little bit. I'm a little nervous about it going wide, and maybe I want to eventually make this into a sexy pot. So when the clay comes all the way out here, it's super hard to get it to go in here. So what I want to do now is get this clay to just have a little bit of a narrower neck. So biggest mistake people do is they start in the middle. And when you start in the middle collaring, it starts to push this clay down. The other thing is people go too slow, and this is an aggressive move. So aggressive moves need to be wet and fast. So 6 points, finger, thumb, space between two knuckles on both hands, hands attached. Big correction is when people's hands are over here, one hand may go higher than the other, and now we've got this twist. But if your hands are attached, elbows on your body, wheel going fast, no pressure, no pressure, no pressure, no pressure, no pressure. Oh my God, it's getting wonky. What do I do? Don't worry about it. When you get off, it will go right back to the circle. Okay, so it may look like, oh, but when you get up here and you slowly take your hands off, it'll straighten out. I'm gonna go ahead and do that again without talking. Make sure you come all the way up. we don't want to forget about that lip. Imagine you're playing a record and you're playing it and it's going and it's going and it's going and you're loving the lyrics, and then you just stop and you forget the last lyric of the song. Same thing. We want to pay attention to the last line in the song the same way we cared about the introduction, even if it's all just instrumental. So now I'm going to get down here. I slow my wheel down just a little bit so I can get a real firm grip on that bottom. And now I'll actually even speed up. So how big can 7 pounds go? Well, it depends on obviously how wide your pot is and how thick you want your walls to be. I'm aiming for pretty thick walls. I am a hashtag carve the SHIT out of stuff. So I don't like when my walls are super thin. I'm also a bull in a china shop. Move around way too fast. So I break things. If you can hear the hum in my wheel, but me and my 25-year-old clay boss over here, you hear that? That's the nice sort of 1, 2, 3 sound. If your wheel's doing this, you're going a little fast, and it means your hand is going to have to speed up too. Couple of corrections. What happens when you get the swirl? You get the swirl because you're not getting a full revolution. So pulling the walls and the speed of your wheel coinciding and working together, that's a whole nother skill. And that's why working on basic cylinders is always a great idea. Notice that little sort of thing that's traveling up? That is my inside hand being a little lower than my outside hand. I'm gonna get my hand in there to get the water out, but there's always, you know, a sponge on a stick. You can always just rubber band a sponge on a stick. I just get one pull in here to sort of straighten it out a little bit. A little less of a volcano. I personally like finger lines on my pots, but when I carve it, I choose to have it a little smoother. All right, so let's see where we're at here. Looks like we are at about 11 inches by 5.5. So that's 7 pounds. I think that I don't have very much down here on the bottom. So I think that we've utilized as much clay as I would like to utilize for the thickness of my pot. Now, let's say I want to straighten this out a little bit. I'm gonna get a little bit more height on my lip here. So my lip is a little wonky. Let's talk about the pin tool action. Okay, so many different ways to take the lip off. Now, we want to take off as minimal as possible. So I see some people do this, some people use a wire tool. I think that's all nuts. So what I do is I wet my fingers. I'm gonna firmly hold onto my pot, not where I'm making a mark. Elbows are on my body. I'm gonna take my pin tool, I'm gonna lean it on my thumb, and I'm gonna pretend I'm playing pool. So I'm gonna go ahead and lean it on my thumb and slowly drive it with revolutions till I hit my finger and then lift. Now this is a relatively fast thing, and we wanna go as minimal as possible. Here we go. And then lift. So you see, okay, always touch your clay with 2 hands, or your hands are attached, or just something like that. All right, so let's say we wanna straighten this out. We've got all sorts of funky tools. I'm gonna use my ginormous, one of my favorite tools. Again, the hole is there to hold it with like that. It's not there for decorative or hanging reasons. I'm gonna hold this as vertical to the wheel, perpendicular to the wheel as I can. I'm gonna push it with my inside hand up against the edge. I have to close my eyes. Close one eye, sorry, not all my eyes. All of them, all my eyes. And I'm gonna push that up against the tool. So I'm not actually carving much clay off. I did take some slip off. I'm not taking the thick spots and making them thinner. I just literally pushed this wonky, wavy wall that was evenly consistent and pushed it up there to straighten it out. One day I'm gonna come up with an analogy for why that is. Now I'm just gonna do something slightly decorative because I want to, after I So I'm gonna take off. So the inside of my pot looks like this. I want the outside of my pot to look like this. So wood tool, leaning up against the side here, 2 hands, drive it down. I'm gonna use my pin tool just because that's what I teach my members here at the studio. And I'm going to just go ahead and take that off there. I'm doing this new thing where I'm making something so that my glaze can sort of land on something. So I'm gonna give myself this little bit of a ledge here. I don't really like to wax my pots. All right, and now I'm going to just sort of pick a spot up here, and just for the fun of it, I'm gonna fold that over. I want to definitively make it look like I did it on purpose. So I stick my nail in there to really give it a line. Everything you do is purposeful for design. It's not like, oh, look what accidentally happened. This is gonna actually visually give me a frame for me to do my carving in between here and here. All right, I think that's it. So this is 7 pounds of clay. Again, the height is now, because I folded that lip a little, it's about 10.5. The width of the actual cylinder inside is about 4 3/4 with my lip on top is about 6. I'd say that my wall is about 3/8 of an inch thick. Again, that's gonna allow me to carve this. 3/8 of an inch is also gonna allow you to give this a little shape if you wanted to, without making the walls too thin. When you make the walls too thin and then you give it a little bit of shape of a sexy pot, you may not get the stability that you need and you'll get a little bit of flop. So there it is, 7-pound cylinder. Remember, you're just increasing the size of your tools. So as your clay gets bigger, so do your tools. And what I mean by tools, I mean your fingers. Keep practicing, try the smaller cylinders, and gradually move up to 7 pounds. You don't have to go from 2 pounds to 7 pounds. Hey, and if you've got any ideas for videos, please go ahead and let me know. Either message me or write it right in the comments. Have a great day, guys. Bye.